Hi everyone, and welcome to Terry Lawson Photography Conversations. It's February 2nd, 2013, and today we're in my studio here in Edmonton, Alberta, and we have the pleasure of having with us David Waddington, a local photographer. In the last year, David has become immersed in photography, and he uses it as fuel for his life and to create beautiful artistic photographs. Through social media, he has become involved with many other local photographers and spends many hours tramping around the city and surrounding areas looking for that perfect scene to photograph. He is also one of the administrators for the Edmonton Photographers page on Google+. So hi Dave, and welcome to Conversations.
Hi Terry, how you doing?
I'm doing great. To start things off, Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I was born and raised here in Edmonton, Alberta. I've lived here since 1967 when I was born. I have lived a little bit in Ontario, a little bit in BC, a couple of years in each area. Ventured up to the Yukon for a little while.
Oh, cool.
It was quite interesting up there. Basically been a laborer for most of my life, doing skilled labor and stuff like that. And just kind of recently, in the last few years, fell in love with photography.
Yeah. Now, did you do much photography at all before you really dove into it?
I had like a little point-and-click camera that I would go around and take pictures with. My daughter and I, we went to California in 2006, and the camera spent most of its time in the glove box of the car, but we'd occasionally take it out and take a picture of something that was significant to us, right?
Yeah.
But never really got into it until just a few years ago.
So what was the trigger that made you make the jump into photography?
Well,
Big way.
I went to Jasper with a friend of mine, and I took the point-and-click camera, and we went to Athabasca Falls, and I took a bunch of pictures around that area, and me and my friend were just like having a lot of fun with it, and it was just like the whole point of the trip was just to take pictures and goof around, taking pictures of him in stupid poses and of course beautiful landscape around us, right? And when we came back, I threw those pictures on my computer and just started plugging around with them, playing around with them, and then I shared some of them on Facebook, and mysteriously an old friend of mine just popped up. Somebody I hadn't communicated with for several years, asked for a friend request, and I said okay. And so my friend is Carl Stevens. I had known him years and years ago, and he just like, I just wanted to comment on your photos that you had taken in Jasper. They're amazing. You got great composition skills. I'm like, sorry, well, I don't know what you mean. It was just oblivious to me, right? And he says, you just seem to have an eye for it. And I'm like, oh, well, thanks. And then Carl and I just seemed to start getting back together again. And Carl is a Pentax user, and he had a nice Pentax camera. And he's like, come out and take pictures with me. So we'd go out, and he'd take pictures with his Pentax, and I'd use my little point and shoot.
Yeah.
And then it got to the point where he'd start teaching me about how to use an SLR. And I really got interested. I was like, this is kind of neat. And I didn't know you could do all these little fancy little things, right? With shutter speed and ISO and aperture. So it really started to intrigue me with the different things that you could do just with the camera itself.
Mm-hmm.
So more often we'd start going out, I would actually be using his camera instead of my own.
Cool.
He'd let me use it, and I'd throw in my own memory card, and we'd snap pictures, and then I'd go home and play with them and post them. And I started getting a lot more comments from my family about my photos, and it's like there seemed to be a lot of interest. And I was like, wow. And I didn't take that, at full weight, because, family is always supportive.
They're the worst critics, actually, because they're always, it doesn't matter what you do, it's fantastic, right?
Yeah. So I didn't really put much weight into it, but I was really starting to enjoy what I was doing, and I thought, well, you know what? I might, work towards purchasing my own camera and eventually just see where it goes as, like, you know, hobby kind of like thing. And then just last year, early in February, I purchased the used Nikon D300. And the first time I went out taking pictures with this camera, I didn't even know how to use it, right? And I mean, I had some general idea because some similar features on the Pentax, but I went out and I took some shots, and I came home and I'm like, wow, these are awesome. and then, you know, I plugged them into the computer, and at that time I really got into HDR, like right off the bat, and I was playing with HDR software and came up with some really nice HDR images, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And I really liked the shots that I was getting, and I was like, I really like this. This is fun. It's fun, you know, going out and taking the pictures and finding things that are interesting to take pictures of. And then for me, it was even more fun sitting at the computer
and going through the processing,
and going through the processing of those images. I was like, wow, I really enjoy this. So that's pretty much where I'm at right now, where it's just I've found that photography opens your eyes and provides so much beauty around you. Like, I really used to hate this city. I thought it was an ugly, horrible city. But ever since I've discovered photography, it's a beautiful city.
Well, and I think what's neat about that is by you seeing that through the lens of your camera and creating these images, you're actually showing people in your mind the beauty that you see in your environment.
Exactly.
And that's a pretty cool thing.
And I think that's one of the things that really starts to drive me is that, you know, for example, say you drive by Canada Place 100 times, and you know, it's Canada Place, whatever. But one day you go by there with your camera, you know, intent on taking a picture at a certain time, you know, with the sun in a certain spot, and you get just a magnificent image, and it's not just Canada Place anymore.
And what happens too, the more you get into your photography, the more your eyes are looking. As you're walking down the street, as you're driving in your car. I know my wife gets very frustrated with me when I'm driving, because I'm always looking around at possible photo shots, you know. So,
and same with like my roommate. Occasionally we'll be going, whatever, let's go here for dinner or whatever, and I'll be driving and say it's close to sunset, and be like, whoa, look at that over there, and I'd like totally just drive off the path, and he's like, what are you looking at? And I'm like, oh, I just wanted to see if this is a good photo shot for here, you know, or whatever. And yeah, it really kind of starts providing you with different directions in your life.
Yeah. Now, I'm wondering if you've, as you've gotten into photography and are taking all these images, whether you have found that you're learning things about yourself from taking photographs.
Definitely. Photography has it's opened my eyes to my own characteristics, certain things about me, and the thing, like, with me is I use Google Plus a lot in order to learn about photography, and through things of other photographers, you know, some people say a certain thing and you look at it and like, that's very true. And then you look at it about yourself and it's like, wow, that's even more true. And it's one of the biggest things that I learned was that when you take a picture of something and you're just like, wow, that's, you know, beautiful, and you think that it's beautiful, and then you put it on the computer and you share it with everybody, you're sharing a piece of yourself.
Exactly.
With everybody, right? And now that you've opened yourself up to everyone, now you're vulnerable, right? Where you're open to criticism and you're open to compliment as well, and it just really changes the way you approach things, I find.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a really awakening experience for me too in that respect.
Now, as you've been out there beating the path and looking for those shots, have you found your photographs going in a particular direction as far as a theme that David Waddington takes photographs of?
Not really. I'm kind of still scattering all over the place right now because it's still new and I'm trying like different things. Like so far this year, I've only taken one picture outside.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Everything else I've done so far this year has been indoor in the studio, trying different things that way.
Yeah. You said that you had a Nikon D300.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still using that camera?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things that photographers like is all the stuff they can get for their cameras, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lenses and filters and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Is there any piece of equipment that you have in your gear bag that you feel is probably the most important thing you've got for your camera?
Well, the thing is, right now I am very limited on gear. I have my Nikon D300 and I have a 50mm prime lens, and that's all.
Is that right? Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because I've looked at a lot of your photographs, and that's pretty neat that you're able to capture those images with that minimal equipment.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
That was kind of one thing that I learned from people on, sharing information on Google Plus, and they were talking about starting out, and one of the key elements is that learning how to use one lens and stay with that lens until you are fully comfortable and fully capable of taking any shot you want with that one lens. So.
Yeah, well, I do that often. I've only got two lenses. I've got an 18 to 105, and I've got a 70 to 300. Those are the two lenses that I have. And I always, whenever I go out to shoot something, I'll only take one lens with me. And it does the same thing. You learn what that lens can do.
Right.
So that you have a choice then, when you know where you're going to take a photograph, of being able to make a decision about what lens you're going to have to take those photographs.
And the other thing too, I find it gives you the option to be more creative. Like, for example, I went to the Alberta Aviation Museum.
Isn't that a wonderful place?
It is. It's great.
Man.
And but I mean, these are large aircraft, and you're up close, so typically you're going to need a very wide angle lens to photograph the whole aircraft. So with the 50mm lens, I got to get farther away, but you can't because you're indoors, right?
That's right.
So it forces you to become more creative and say, okay, let's maybe try to focus on certain areas that are detailed or abstract or something like that. So
what I like about that concept is it's kind of neat not to show everything.
yeah,
It's nice to get in closer, because it gets the viewer to imagine what's beyond the edges of the photograph.
right.
And that's kind of a nice way to get the viewer involved in your picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing too that I like to do is with the 50mm, say for example, there's the shot that I want to take that I can't get everything in because it's not wide enough. So then I'll just take the shot in segments
together,
and then stitch them together using the software.
Yeah.
So.
I noticed that on some of the social media sites that there's a lot of people starting to do that. Taking panorama shots.
Yeah.
It's becoming quite popular.
Panorama is pretty fun, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Now, you've been out taking many photographs, in the city and in surrounding areas. Is there a moment that you can recall that was sort of one of your most pleasant experiences taking a photograph?
I have a friend that lives in California. We've known each other for a very long time. And of course, California, she's got some great views and stuff like that. But she admires my work, and I said that I was going to go out one day and take a picture just for her, right?
Right.
So I got up early one morning and headed down to the river valley, and I was trying to capture the sunset in a nice, calm river. Of course, North Saskatchewan isn't very calm, but I managed to find a spot, and I got like right down, basically touching the water, and the area was really difficult to get to. And it took me a long time to find this place, and I'm looking at my watch, and I'm like, oh, the sun's coming up. I gotta get set up and ready to go. And so I just got the tripod set up, got the camera on the tripod, positioned it, set all my settings, and hit OK to fire my bracketing just at the exact perfect right time. It was just like, it couldn't have been any better, because it just happened right at that right time. And then I got my shots, and then I went home and I put them in the computer. I'm like, wow, these are awesome. I sent it to her, and she just loved it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And isn't it interesting how you spend hours and hours and hours taking photographs, and very often it is amazing how in that one instance everything comes together.
Yeah.
Like you hadn't planned it to be that way. It just happens. And it's an amazing feeling when it does happen.
Yeah, and it's happened to me a few times where, I just I want to go to this particular place at this particular time and try to get there, and for whatever reason something happens and you're running behind, but that running behind actually works in your favor. And you get there and it's like, wow, this is better than probably it would have been if I had gotten here earlier.
Yeah. No, I know it's that is an amazing feeling. I love it too.
Yeah.
Now you've been working hard at this for a year, and you've got a little bit of an experience now on what's involved in taking photographs and processing and that sort of thing. If you were talking to someone who's just getting ready to make the plunge into taking photographs, what sort of advice would you give them to help them start their journey?
I think the big thing with photography is that you got to be passionate about it, because it is. There's billions of photographers out there. If you want to go out there and try to make money doing it, you have to be really good. And it's not that being really good is not just something that's in you. It's something that you have to go out and find. Research and learning and all those kinds of things, spending the time to find out everything that you can in order to be good at it. In order to do that, you need to be passionate about it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about this when we got together a couple of weeks ago, about the fact that there are, as you say, there's billions of photographers out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they all have, in today's world, this wonderful technology that gives them the ability to take really good photographs.
Yeah.
But I think, and we discussed this, it is those select few that know actually how to take a photograph, as far as lighting is concerned, composition, all of those things.
Right.
And that's what separates the picture taker from a photographer.
Well, you can kind of even compare it to like music bands and stuff like that, right? Where you have a band that comes out with a one-hit wonder, those kind of things, and you'll get a photographer that's like that, where they'll take one great photograph, and then it might go viral or whatever the case may be. It's a great photograph, and then you'll never hear from that photographer again, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And it's the same thing with music, where you have certain bands, they're a great song, but that's all they ever had is one song.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the thing, you just got to keep at it and keep working hard, be passionate about it, and you'll always find more.
Now we have technology, we have the ability to take really good photographs and process photographs. And what for you, amongst all of that, is the most challenging part of taking a photograph?
determining the amount of light.
Okay,
That's
that's interesting.
like, if I really like taking, sunsets and sunrises as far as landscape goes. And in order to properly light the photograph, it's pretty difficult because, when you have the sun coming up in one spot, you got a really bright spot, and then everything else is pretty much in shadow. So you got to try to set it all right, and you don't have much time in order to do it.
No, that's right.
With a sunrise or a sunset. So there's that, and even going with studio shots. Doing portraits, the lighting for me has always been the most difficult thing so far.
Yeah, I agree with that because in a situation with sunrises and sunset, there's such a dynamic range of light that you're dealing with. So do you bracket your shots most of the time?
Yeah, I do pretty much. Like when I'm doing landscape, I'll always bracket, even if I'm not going to be doing an HDR. That'll just give me a wider range of light to play with. And then when I get home and I put the images on the computer, I usually try to take the image that has the histogram with most of the data on the right hand side.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you just mentioned you do work in your studio at your place.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have noticed a number of your photographs, I think you call them smoke images.
Yeah.
I'm very intrigued by that, and I'd maybe like you to take a few minutes just to tell us about the process in creating those images and some of the techniques you use to make them come alive.
Okay. Well, initially when I first started, it was just one speed light aimed behind the incense burning, and it created just a normal smoky looking image, and as I tried different things, progressed different things, I started using basically a bunch of white reflectors all around the incense, and then having the flash come behind. And the white reflectors really bring out a lot more light and a lot more detail in the smoke itself. So that was basically my first thing, was to try to get more detail in the smoke. And then going from there, after I take 500-600 shots of a couple sticks of incense burning, then I'll slap them in the computer, and then I just start sitting there and going through them. And with me, ever since I was a little kid, I always had an ability to see something that wasn't there. Whether I'm looking at a floor tile or something or other, you can always, if you stare at it long enough, you can eventually see something, a shape, a figure, a head, a face, or something like that. And that was something that came with me with the smoke too. It just, just sit there staring at the images long enough, and I'd start seeing something, and I'd be like, okay, well, if I change this and flip this over like that, then there's going to be something there, right? So there's a lot of playing around with in Photoshop.
Well, the images are amazing because you are creating so much from just that basic image that you have when you took the photograph.
Mm-hmm.
There must be a lot of hours spent processing that image to get the final product.
A lot of times what I'll do is that I'll be flipping through images of the smoke that I've taken, and then I'll just stop at one and stare at it for a really long time and say, okay, there's something there, and I'll just load it up into Photoshop, and then I keep going through the other images, and I usually just kind of browse through them in Lightroom, and then by the time I'm done, I usually have 5 or 6 of them set up ready to go in Photoshop, and I don't even really know where I'm going at that point until I start getting pieces together and I start finding different things that actually connect together.
Yeah. So, not wanting to give away any of your secrets, but what sort of common things do you do as far as that post-processing is concerned?
A lot of it ends up either I will take the image and start rotating it on rotating different layers on top of each other. So like a floral pattern,
right?
Where I'll take the image, find a point where I want to rotate it from, and then make a duplicate of that image, rotate it usually like 22.5 degrees, and then just keep stamping it around, and that'll make like a floral image, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes I'll take an image and I'll just flip it over and then overlap it on itself.
Okay, yeah.
And sometimes that works out. And then sometimes even flipping it over, overlapping it onto itself, and then taking that and overlapping it onto itself. So sometimes it can get pretty extreme.
Yeah. No, well, I'm really impressed with them because it's something that you look at, and there's a lot of imagination involved for the viewer to look at this image and see these, as you say, you start to see things that are in that image, and it's very cool. I think you're doing a good job at that. So is that what you've been working on quite a lot in your studio?
Well, I do photograph a lot of it, the smoke, but I've also been trying like different product shots and things like that. I want to try to start working into stock photography, and hopefully that can end up being profitable for me.
So you are actually going in a direction, whether you know it or not, right?
Oh no, I know I'm going in a direction. I have steps that I want to take in order to get to a certain point. So.
Yeah. Now, I also saw on your blog you have talked about a 5-year plan, which I find interesting, and I think it's a great thing for people to do because it keeps them moving forward to an objective. So maybe tell us about your 5-year plan and what you got planned for yourself.
Well, my ultimate goal of my 5-year plan, so basically in 5 years, I want to be able to be a professional photographer, meaning that photography is my primary source of income, and I don't have to work doing my general labor job that I do right now. So the process is going to be working towards getting my freedom, I guess would be called. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty neat because photography is a beautiful way to spend your life, because as you say, you're independent.
Yeah.
You get to do it when you want to do it, and I think there's this continual learning process that you go through along that journey, and you're always learning.
Yeah. Well, there's one photographer I follow on Google Plus, and apparently, like, this guy, he travels all over the world, taking pictures of some amazing stuff. He's a great photographer, but I don't know him. I've never met him, but I've heard that he lives on craft dinner and and stuff like that. He basically spends all his money on his craft. In order to go to all these nice places, and he sacrifices all these other things just so that he can do that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, do you have any photographers that provide you with your inspiration?
Yeah, for sure. There's Elia Locardi. He's the gentleman I was talking about that sacrifices everything to go around the world and take pictures. Trey Ratcliffe. Definitely, he's just an amazing HDR photographer. I have noticed, though, he's starting to kind of get away from HDR.
He is.
So it's kind of interesting to see that.
Yeah.
Then, like for studio photography, Alex Koloskov, he does some great lighting. He does water splashes, which is really cool. And then another landscape photographer that I really like is Midori Chan. She's not really well known. She lives in Japan and she travels the world as well, but she takes some amazing shots.
Very good. So, Dave, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to come and talk to us. We learned a lot about you and a lot about your photography, and I know that people that are listening to this are probably going to go and want to have a look at some of your photographs on Google Plus. and that sort of thing.
All right, thanks very much for having me, Terry.
No problem. That's great. You have been listening to Terry Lawson Photography Conversations, a series of interviews with local photographers and those involved in the art scene. I hope you can join us for our next interview with local photographer Mike Isaac.